Imagine standing in a courtroom, knowing that the next few minutes could decide the next 15 years of your life. That's exactly the situation Samantha Venegas found herself in during a tense sentencing hearing that quickly turned into a dramatic moment inside the courtroom. Venegas was facing serious charges after authorities discovered more than 400 grams of illegal drugs connected to her case. Despite the severity of the charge, she stood before the judge asking for another chance. She claimed she wasn't the mastermind behind the operation, insisting that she was only a pawn in a much bigger scheme. During her testimony, Venegas openly admitted that addiction had controlled much of her life. She spoke about growing up in poverty and explained how her past mistakes and the influence of people around her pushed her deeper into crime. She even tried to explain that some of her previous violations happened during a difficult time in her life after losing her grandfather. But the prosecution wasn't convinced. Prosecutors pointed to one crucial piece of evidence that strongly contradicted her story. The key to the lockbox containing the drugs was found in Venegas's possession. According to them, this proved she had direct control over the drugs and wasn't just an innocent bystander caught in someone else's operation. As the judge reviewed her long criminal history, the situation became even more serious. Records showed multiple violations of probation and parole in the past, raising doubts about whether she could follow the rules if given another chance. The courtroom fell silent as the judge prepared to make the final decision. In the end, the judge ruled that probation simply wasn't an option due to the large amount of drugs involved and her repeated history of violations. Venegas was sentenced to 15 years in prison, along with a $2,000 fine, bringing a dramatic end to a case that showed just how quickly decisions and past mistakes can shape someone's future. And in that moment, the reality of the courtroom was clear. Sometimes the past weighs too heavily for a second chance.
State versus Samantha Venegas. Could I have parties announced?
Jason Garrett, State, Your Honor.
Danny Callahan, defense.
And are you Ms. Venegas?
Yes, ma'am.
You entered a plea to count 2 on March 26. You entered a plea of no contest. According to your plea bargain agreement, punishment is to be assessed at a cap of 15 years in the prison. There's a $2,000 fine. State opposes your application for community supervision and deferred adjudication. They're taking in consideration 2024 CR 008054. Have both parties had a chance to review the PSI report and TAP evaluation?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objections, state or defense?
No, Your Honor.
Any witnesses, state?
State.
Defense, any witnesses?
Only allocution in writing from the defendant.
All right, any objections to the court reviewing the defendant's writing?
No, Your Honor, the state is actually reviewed. No objection.
All right, the court will hear argument. Well, before I hear argument, there are some things that defense maybe you can address with the court. It says in the PSI that her guilt is minimized. And I did read where she's saying that the vehicle's not hers. She knew there was drugs in the trunk, but she didn't throw them away. She didn't do anything about it. So I don't know if there's any insight you would like to give on that.
Yes, Your Honor. I think it's a good inference from the stipulations and the PSI that she was used as a pawn, taking advantage of her poverty and her addictions to methamphetamine. And she's ashamed of that in her life, not only you, but more particularly to her family. There is an element of voluntariness in her actions. There's also an element of being trapped in her actions. And that was one of the things I would ask the court to consider before you assess punishment. I have 3 other remarks.
All right, you may proceed.
And I suggest to the court as a proper resolution of this case, because she's still relatively young, deferred adjudication, 10 years, ISF treatment, and she asks you to put her into drug court, which is intensive supervision for every day. That shows some indication of remorse and desire to be rehabilitated.
All right, so here's part of my issues, right?
Yes, ma'am.
One, I have to look at criminal history. And I would have clients sometimes, you know what they would tell me? Why are people looking at my criminal history? We're just here for this. That was in the past. But I would always tell them that your criminal history is sort of like a credit report. And what you're trying to get is probation. So people are trying to say, oh, has she been placed on probation before? You know, will she do well? So it shows that you've been on probation before, and a motion to revoke was filed, and you were revoked and sentenced to 5 years. I know that was in 2007.
Right.
And then in 2014, you were sent to prison for another case. And in 2015, there's a case that you were sent to prison for, and I believe these were running concurrently because it appears that they were running concurrently. And then 2016, again, that's a case that was running concurrently with the others. So what I'm viewing, it doesn't appear that you would be a good candidate for probation.
May I say something?
Sure. You want to raise your right hand though, because the state may have some questions if you want to say something. All right. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right. You can lower your hand, state your name for the record.
My name is Samantha Benavides. I know, okay, I did, in 2010, I went to prison. I was gonna get reinstated on probation, but I took it up with my grandfather, and my grandfather wanted me to go do the time instead of being reinstated on my probation, because he was scared that I was gonna get messed up again and go do a large number of time, and he was gonna pass away.
And how old were you when that happened?
I was 29, 30. And so that's why I chose that. I chose that because my grandpa asked me to do that, and he ended up passing away 6 months before my release. But that is why I was going to get reinstated. At the time, my attorney was William Reese, and they were going to reinstate me and send me home. But my grandpa, I went to prison.
All right. So you're telling me that I could understand maybe there being pressure on you with saying, oh, let me listen to my grandfather and take this time. But at the time, you were 29, 30. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other cases, because you got out of prison and then you pick up more cases.
In 2014, I revoked. I had my parole, and I went back to ISF for the last 3 months of my my parole, and then that was done with that. And then in 2016, I went to prison again in 2016, and then I revoked and went back to safety, and I came out and I completed the rest of my probation.
Okay. Why do you keep failing that probation?
I went with parole the second.
Well, I mean, you
Yeah.
failed at probation and you failed at parole. Why?
The first time when I was younger, I really don't have, I made some poor choices in my life back then, and I was young, I was ignorant.
But no, for the case that you said the first case, you said, I just agreed to be revoked because of my grandfather.
Yeah.
All right. You're telling me then you were 29.
Yes, I
30.
didn't go report.
All
I didn't go
right.
report, and I
then
had
you-
a drinking problem back then.
Okay.
And back then I would use cocaine a little, and but I had a heavy drinking problem. So I was young, I was stupid, I was living in the bars basically. And I wasn't, keep out there running the streets or nothing like that. I just didn't want to go report. And that was my biggest downfall right there. If I would have just went and reported and went and taken a UA, everything would have been okay. My life would have been a little bit, different. The other time, when I got out, I violated parole. It was because I came out of dirty UA.
Okay. Let me ask you this,
Okay.
because I understand your past. Do you know the amount of drugs this was, the weight of it?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
It's a lot, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You can continue.
My life for a while, I was just, I made a lot of mistakes and I'm not proud of it. I'm very sorry for them. If I could take them all back, I would. Now that I'm older, now that I see things differently, and trust me, this opened my eyes. There's been a lot, I was, I, 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 I was just trying to, this last offense, I was trying to, get by, pay my bills. I was stuck in it. I was just trying to get out of it. And I see now that what it cost me, what it could cost me. And I apologize for that.
No, but here's the thing. You had a previous drug case.
Yes, ma'am.
So I don't understand why you continue to try to build your happiness off somebody else's misery. So that's basically what you're doing. You're taking a shortcut and you're building your happiness off somebody else's misery. Addiction and can't stop. And there you are for money.
But you're right.
All right. State, do you have any questions?
Just facts of this case.
Okay.
Ms. Venegas, on this case, you stated that the drugs weren't yours or the drugs were somebody else's.
It wasn't mine. It was in the vehicle.
All right. Could you speak up, please?
It wasn't mine. It was in the vehicle. But I was aware that it was in it. And I should have gotten rid of it.
So you're
When I
aware that you had a
located it.
key in your pocket that matched the lock to the box that the drugs were in. correct?
Yes.
Right. Okay. No further question, Your Honor.
Nothing further. I have one other point, Your Honor.
Yes.
She has family support and was unable to get finalized letters into your hand indicating that support. That's all, Your Honor.
All right. Ms. Venegas,
Yes, ma'am.
the amount of drugs in this case
Yes, ma'am.
is, let me see, over 400 grams.
Yes, ma'am.
And from what I read in the police report about the being in your boyfriend's car and you don't know, you just were in your boyfriend's car and you should have got rid of them, but you didn't. It doesn't ring true based upon what I read in the police report, because according to the police report, you're known. That's what was stipulated to. I don't think you're a good candidate for probation. The court is going to find you guilty. The court will sentence you to 15 years in the prison. There's a $2,000 fine. Time and money will run concurrently. The court will take in consideration 2024 CR 008054. I'll suggest the therapeutic community. Did you review the document entitled Trial Court Certification of Defendant's Rights to Appeal with your attorney? Did you understand it?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you sign it?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, because this is a plea bargaining agreement, because I followed your plea bargaining agreement, because you waive your right to appeal, you do not have the court's permission to appeal. Excuse me. Thank you. Because this is a felony conviction, you're not allowed to own or possess any weapons or ammunition. If you have a question over what a weapon or ammunition is, you'll need to speak to an attorney. Do you understand?
The courtroom was quiet, but the tension in the air was impossible to ignore. Everyone inside knew that the next few minutes would determine the future of a woman standing before the judge. Her name was Samantha Venegas, and she was about to hear a decision that could change the course of her life forever. Venegas wasn't in court for a minor mistake. She was facing a very serious charge involving the possession of more than 400 grams of illegal substances. In the eyes of the law, that amount alone made the situation extremely severe. Cases involving that much of an illegal substance are often treated as major offenses, and the consequences can be life-altering. As the hearing began, Venegas stood before the judge, hoping for something many defendants ask for, but don't always receive: another chance. She was asking the court for probation instead of prison. Her argument was simple. She claimed she wasn't truly responsible for the situation she found herself in. According to Venegas, she had been caught up in something much bigger than herself. It was a story that tried to paint her not as the main offender, but as someone who had been used by others. But courtroom decisions are rarely based only on what someone says. Judges rely heavily on evidence, past records, and the facts presented by both sides. When Venegas spoke about her life, she admitted that addiction had played a major role in many of her past mistakes. She didn't deny that her life had been filled with struggles. She talked about growing up in difficult circumstances and dealing with poverty for much of her life. According to her, those challenges pushed her down a path that eventually led her into trouble with the law. For a moment, her words seemed emotional and honest. Addiction, poverty, and difficult life situations are often factors that appear in many court cases. Many defendants try to explain how their environment influenced the choices they made. Venegas also spoke about her family and the impact certain people had on her life. At one point, she explained that the death of her grandfather had deeply affected her. She suggested that during that difficult time, she made poor decisions and allowed herself to be influenced by people who were not looking out for her best interests. It was clear she was trying to convince the judge that her actions were not simply the result of criminal intent, but rather the result of a life filled with hardship and addiction. But as her testimony continued, the prosecution was preparing to challenge her story. Prosecutors began presenting the facts of the case, and one detail stood out more than anything else. When authorities discovered the drugs connected to this case, they were not simply lying out in the open. They were stored inside a lockbox. And according to investigators, the key to that lockbox was found in Venegas's possession. That detail changed everything. If Venegas truly had the key to the lockbox containing the drugs, it suggested something very different from the story she was telling. Instead of being just a pawn in someone else's operation, it implied that she had direct access and control over the substances. The prosecution argued that this single piece of evidence directly contradicted her claim of innocence. They told the court that it wasn't reasonable to believe she had no involvement when she possessed the key to the container holding the drugs. In their view, the evidence showed that she had a clear connection to the illegal substances. As the hearing continued, the judge reviewed more than just the evidence in front of him. Another major factor in the decision would be Venegas's criminal history. Court records showed that this was not the first time Venegas had been involved with the justice system. In fact, she had a long record that included several previous violations of probation and parole. Each time someone receives probation, the court is essentially giving them another opportunity to follow the law while avoiding prison. But that opportunity comes with strict rules. Those rules often include regular check-ins, staying out of trouble, and complying with the conditions set by the court. Unfortunately for Venegas, her past record showed a pattern of failing to follow those rules. Prosecutors emphasized this history to the judge, arguing that probation had already been offered to her before, and she failed to take advantage of it. According to them, giving her another chance would simply repeat the same cycle. The courtroom became quieter as both sides finished presenting their arguments. Everyone inside knew the moment of decision was approaching. For Venegas, this moment likely felt overwhelming. Standing in front of a judge while your entire future hangs in the balance is something few people can truly imagine. She had spoken about addiction. She had spoken about hardship. She had asked for mercy and another chance. But the judge had to weigh those arguments against the facts of the case. The amount of drugs involved was extremely large. Possessing more than 400 grams of illegal substances is considered a very serious offense under the law. Combined with her criminal history and past violations of probation, the situation became much harder to overlook. Judges are often faced with difficult choices in cases like this. On one hand, they may hear stories about addiction, personal struggles, and attempts to turn life around. On the other hand, they must also protect the public and enforce the law. After reviewing everything presented in court, the judge finally delivered his ruling. He explained that the request for probation would not be granted. The decision was based on several factors, including the large quantity of drugs involved and Venegas's extensive history of violating probation and parole in the past. According to the judge, those factors made it impossible to justify giving her another chance outside of prison. The moment the sentence was announced, the reality of the situation became clear. Samantha Venegas was sentenced to 15 years in prison. In addition to the prison sentence, the court also ordered her to pay a $2,000 fine. For Venegas, the outcome marked the end of the hearing and the beginning of a long period behind bars. Cases like this highlight the serious consequences that can come from repeated involvement with the criminal justice system. While many defendants hope that their personal struggles will lead to leniency, the courts must also consider patterns of behavior and the severity of the crimes involved. For Venegas, the judge ultimately determined that the past spoke louder than the promises of change. And in the quiet courtroom where the decision was made, the message was clear. Sometimes the weight of past actions becomes too heavy for the court to ignore.